I'm Angie Fenton with Extol. Today I'm talking sister to sister, literally sister to sister. My sister, who lives in Fenton, Michigan, wanted to talk a bit about our differing experiences growing up. But before I bring Jen into the conversation, she has a doctorate in rhetoric and writing, a master's in public administration with a concentration in constitutional law, a master's in English with a concentration in writing and rhetoric and African American literature, and a bachelor's in African American history. She's also a certified group exercise instructor and the oldest of the four girls in our family. And I want to kind of set the scene. It's morning right now. Jen and I are having coffee and a conversation. It's good to see you, my big sister.
Good morning, little sister.
So, Jen and I are a part of five siblings. Our eldest being a brother who we always, at least I always call homemade, but we were the four girls. All of us were adopted. We're not biologically related. Our parents are white and our ethnicities and races all vary. And we grew up in the small town of Holly, Michigan, which is actually classified as a village and was very rural. We had a rural existence. Our mother was a single mom. Our parents divorced when I was 6. Jen's 4 years older, almost.
3.5. Yeah.
3.5 than I am. And she is definitely counting. And we had what I think are the same but differing childhoods. And really, Jen, wanted to talk with you about your experience with that. So let's start with this. I mean, we were among the small amount of diversity in our town of
Yes.
Holly, right?
We pretty much made up the diversity. We did. Yeah, I think the population then was maybe 6% African American, maybe. And then we had a couple of Filipino, a couple of Mexican, sprinkled in there as well.
And we have a sister who's Korean.
Correct. And some Korean and I believe Chinese. I don't want to just lump it together and say Asians because, there's a whole bunch of diversity, but yes. So very small. But overall, the experience wasn't too negative. I mean, when you think about all the horrible things that you hear that can happen racially, I didn't experience a whole bunch of that in Holly. I mean, of course, some stuff there. I think there was probably more petty stuff just being teenagers in middle school than it was racially driven to my face, at least. I can't say what was said behind closed doors because I know there was a lot of dissent, things that I started to see as I got a little older towards high school, things I definitely see when I came back to visit from college. But as for in your face and completely hostile, I can thankfully say that was not my experience growing up there.
And I think that's definitely a similarity for us. I mean, when I think of Holly, Michigan, I'm so grateful that we grew up there. I really feel like the town as a whole embraced us. I had, the typical childhood issues. And really, if there were issues, it was with divorce in our own family. Those were where the big issues, and your normal growing up kinds of things, I would say. But,
right.
I always felt just loved and supported by our community, and never did I ever even think that what I looked like or the color of my skin was how people based decisions. And I'm so appreciative of that. But let's talk about Mom, because we see this now more. I mean, I remember growing up and not seeing people who look like me. I mean, you and I are both multiracial, and we have white mom, and our parents are divorced, but white dad, white grandparents, and didn't really know much. But man, Mom tried to make sure that we were connected to the Black culture as much as she could.
I think as much as she definitely understood. There is a lot of heavy lifting, even dealing with it as a parent myself. There's a lot of heavy lifting that goes into being inclusive and exploring not just history, but culture and what it takes to be involved in the culture. And the nice thing was, at least for myself, the group of girls that I hung out with in middle school and high school, we were, again, the diversity. We had myself, we had Yvette, whose family was from Mexico. We had a girl named Lisa, who is half Black, half Filipino. We had Bernardo, whose family, again, from the Philippines, and he's not a girl, so, he just gets lumped in. But I had a diverse group that I actually hung around with. So, having other Black friends, having other people that I could talk to definitely gave a little bit more inclusion. Having Black members of the church that I got to spend time with, just to feel a little more connected to people who did look like me. And that's something that our mother definitely fostered. It wasn't like she felt that I would gravitate more toward them and lose that relationship with her. It was something that she understood would be necessary. Have, strong Black figures in your life, so not everything is taken from the white point of view.
I remember Pecolia Williams. Oh
Mm-hmm.
my goodness. And spending nights at her house, and Gail High
Correct.
and her family, and spending time with them. And Mom always making sure that back then it was hard to find dolls and Christmas ornaments and things that looked like us. And Mom, making a concerted effort to ensure that we had those things. I mean, I still have Christmas ornaments with brown skinned angels and from our childhood. But Jen, you told me a story that I don't remember about something that our mom did when it came to that amazing Sears book. Now, I want to share this. I mean, we didn't have much. I remember my first real trip to Sears, getting new clothes. I was in the 6th grade, got a lot of hand-me-downs. Again, Mom was a single mom. She was a nurse raising 5 kids, zero help from our dad. And thanks to her mom and dad, our grandparents, she worked really, really hard. But I mean, we didn't have stuff. We didn't have the nice things, but she would spend money on us at Christmas and get us things. Like, everybody got one thing that they absolutely loved. But when that Sears book would come in the mail, you'd open the pages and just dream like the kids, like my own daughter does now when she watches those darn YouTube channels about kids playing with toys and wants all those toys. But Jen, you told me a story the other day about what she did when a Sears book arrived. And I'd love for you to share that.
Okay, so you were probably a baby at the time. I was 4. So this obviously is not my memory, but a conversation I had with Mom maybe a couple of weeks ago, because she had gotten a catalog in the mail, like we talked about, that Sears catalog. And apparently I was looking through it, and I don't know if if I made a distressed sound or I was just kind of curious, but she looked down and noticed that all of the children in the area of the magazine I was looking at playing with toys were white. So she actually wrote a letter to Sears headquarters asking for diversity to be shown on those pages, because she had children that were non-white, and she said that we deserve to be included as well. And so, you think this is back way in the 70s, 1970s. And she's writing this letter to encourage them to be more inclusive. So that was the very quiet behind the scenes work that she took to heart for us, in noting that, as we call it now, representation matters. Absolutely, 100%. So it was those types of things that, talking about a person trying, she's taking on a pretty big corporation and saying, hey, up your game quite a bit. So that was pretty awesome to hear.
I love that story. You turn the big 50 this year. I
Heck
just
yes.
turned 46. And so I graduated back in the early 90s. So you going back to that. And at that time, I mean, I really, people are people and people are people first. And that is something I will always celebrate and honor and respect how people want to be identified. And for me, I've had a lot of questions now on how I want to be identified. And, human, Angie, that's always my response, because that's how I see myself. But I also remember becoming aware. I mean, you and I were both voracious readers from very young ages. And I remember reading books about Martin Luther King Jr. and marches and equality and diversity and racism, the books that were from back then. And in fact, she sent me one of her infamous boxes of stuff. Mom, stop doing that. But some of that stuff I appreciate, but she had sent me something that I had just not thought of back when I was in the elementary school. We didn't teach Black history. And I, along with a white friend whose mother was the president of the PTA, Tiffany, and I put together lesson plans for K through 6 to teach and honor Martin Luther King Jr. And our principal, who turned out to be, I mean, he was a wonderful, wonderful person, rest in peace. But he said no. And then he found out that Tiffany's mom was, president of the PTA, and our mom sat in his office and refused to leave until he said, okay, well, guess what? They taught Martin Luther King Jr. on Martin Luther King Jr. Day. And I mean, that was a major, major win. But later now, looking back at it, because I'd forgotten about it until she sent the box, how she went to bat for us and was open about being clueless about certain things, like, our hair.
Right.
With our hair. I mean, and when she adopted us, she talks about how she adopted kids who needed homes. And when I talk here locally, I've said it over and over again. I mean, she adopted the kids for nobody wanted. I mean, they didn't know what to do with people like you and me being biracial, multiracial back in the 70s. And Mom embraced us all.
Interesting story in at least the state of Michigan as of 11 years ago, because my history of having children was my husband and I had planned to have one and adopt one. Being an adopted person, I was like, okay, we're going to do that. And, for giggles, the first time we were trying to get pregnant, it took about 2 years. So I was getting frustrated. I'm like, fine, we're going to adopt. And so we started the paperwork, got fingerprinted, had the home visit. We were in the clear stretch and I got pregnant. Cool. And then when he turned 6, we're like, okay, now is the time to adopt. Started the paperwork, got fingerprinted, had the home visit, got cleared, got offered 2 girls. And we're like, I don't know if we can go from 1 to 3. And so very sadly, we said no. And the girls ended up going to a coworker of my husband. So we see them, which is pretty awesome. But, the weekend after we said, no, we can't go from 1 to 3, I found out I was pregnant again. So, anyhow, all of that to say, in the state of Michigan, as of 11 years ago, biracial children were considered to be disadvantaged because people weren't sure about taking on mixed race kids. And it kind of blew my mind. I mean, 11 years, that's it. And being biracial was still considered to be a hindrance. So yeah, taking on a couple of biracial babies in the 70s, even more so, because you have to bridge, again, that cultural gap of you are going to be raised in a very Caucasian environment, very Caucasian existence, but you still need to understand this other part of your culture because it's printed on you and people will make those snap judgments and they make them all the time, whether it's skin color, mode of speech, what you physically look like. There is a lot wrapped up that people make these visual snap judgments. And she tried to ease some of that, but also educate us So I actually have in my home the big, I'm trying to think, they were encyclopedias maybe
Oh
from
yeah. Oh yeah.
Encyclopedia Britannica of Black Americans. And
Yeah.
when she moved and downsized, I inherited those tomes. So I remember even just having access to those things. And
That,
another thing she told me is when I was younger, maybe 2 or 3, she actually took lessons in Detroit on how to braid black hair, which I thought was pretty cool.
I,
So,
I I think that's amazing. Now we also, as sisters, I mean, we've had some fun experiences. Like, I mean, do you recall, especially, I mean, because you're a little bit older, I know you do. I mean, times that white mom took all of her kids of differing hues out, and somebody would be like, "Way to go, white lady, for taking your kids, these kids."
in matching shirts.
And
Don't forget, we all had matching shirts.
but then she'd be like, I'm their mom. Like I'm their mom." And that was something that was foreign for a lot of people. We were the first family for a lot of people to see someone who had embraced all differing kinds of individuals. And
Yep.
she accepted that. I mean, with grace, and she was as proud of us as any mother.
Absolutely. So one of those things, when we were trying to adopt the second time, the lady, the head of the Catholic Charities, was a classmate of mine in grad school. And she asked me to come in and speak to prospective adoptive parents as an adopted child, because a lot of people were really worried, like, well, will you form that bond? I said, I said, maybe it won't click in for a bit, but at 2 in the morning, when your kid is scared and they call out for mom and dad, they mean you. And that's exactly it. You have a parental bond. And I know there are plenty of adopted children who have looked for their biological parents. Personally, I've never had the desire. I have my parents.
I think
I'm
I helped
good.
with that.
Yeah, yeah, stick with the crazy, because, you're going to look for a biological and you can just be like, whoa, at least now if I see crazy, I can be like, well, that's not my genetic path. I'm a little more sane.
And I mean, I've shared this before. I had I mean, just incredible, mind blowing experience meeting the family of my biological father, and I've met my biological mother, and I, I'll just say this: even I met my mom when I was 3 weeks old, and mom is my mom. I mean,
Right.
she's my mom, and she's our mom, and that's exactly who I think of and always have thought of. Even though I did have the desire to meet that biological side, more than anything, mine was because I wanted to just say thank you, because there are so many alternatives, things that, I mean, we could have been aborted. I mean, could have been cast away. There are a lot of different things that could have happened to us that didn't, because of our biological parents' decisions. And I'm forever grateful for that. Tell me this though, when it comes to Black History Month, you have a white husband, and so
Hmm.
you have multiracial children. What's important to you, and how do you navigate that?
So interesting. People have asked that before. I did not only date white people because I was raised in a Caucasian household. I dated the rainbow. I actually
Mhm.
was very proud of myself for that. I was like, look, if I'm attracted to you, I'm attracted to you. So I've had Chinese boyfriends, I've had Filipino boyfriends, I've had black boyfriends, I've had Mexican boyfriends. You know, he
You
was
just
just
made
the
me
one.
almost spit my coffee out right there.
Well, you know, I'm just saying he's the one that just kind of stuck. Either that or I was tired of dating, one of the two.
We
Just
love you,
kidding.
Don.
Love him very much. Um, but I suppose the difference, and COVID really has helped with, my kids are virtually taught, which means I get to nose into all of their schoolwork. And quite frankly, I've been teaching virtual for a while, college. So My children have always had work to do during the summer just because I had to work and there's no point in taking the whole summer off. Black history is not a month in this house. It's something that's talked about. We talk about the good and the bad. It's not all struggle and everything. There's a lot of really awesome stuff, but my husband also understands, and when we talk about privilege, that's something he brings out a lot, is he understands his place of privilege because he's watched some of the struggles that I've had. So when we talk about Black inventors and Black musicians and civil rights and different things like that, those are actually very casual conversations in this house all the time. But in particular, this February, in December, so a couple months ago, I learned about a classical Black composer. And now I'm going to forget the name because that's just how it works today. I'm going to have to call my youngest son and ask him. But I was doing a podcast for my university and talking with a coworker, and he's big about music, and so am I. And we started talking about William Grant Still. There's the name. He was a classical composer in the same time as Aaron Copland. Now, I'd heard of Aaron Copland, heard of him, listened to his music, thought, okay. You didn't really do heavy lifting. You wrote like 2 minutes and 43 seconds. But William Grant Still, classical Black composer, beautiful music. And why did it take me 49 years to hear of him? So it's those things, I think, in Black history that really kind of catch me, that yes, there are Black classical composers. There are Black contemporary composers. And it's something that I really thought about in designing a course on contemporary African-American literature. I was like, okay, so we're not just going to start from a place of enslavement. A lot of people like to start Black literature with the slave memoirs. And I understand the impetus for that, but don't stay stuck there. There seems to be this big issue with rooting things back into the enslavement of people instead of celebrating this beautiful literature we have, poetry we have, spoken word art, which is amazing, which I cannot perform, classical music, contemporary music. There's so much more. But
I just want to share this. One of the things when I read the litany of accomplishments and degrees, also Jennifer is very, very, very talented musically. And I want to give a shout out to WUOL, which is one of our public radio stations down here, which has made a concerted effort to play classical music composed by people of every race, and particularly Black composers as well, and making a note of that, because you're exactly right. I mean, we start from enslavement, but there's such a rich history. I would love for Black History Month to no longer be necessary, because we're integrating history throughout the year, like you're saying. But I can't tell you how much I'm learning, because I've made a commitment to learn something new every day, things that I didn't know, that I just have to look back and just go, why? Why weren't we taught that? Who made those decisions? But to wrap here, when we were growing up, I mean, like we both said earlier, we felt supported by our community. And it's funny, Jen, because I have felt the same way. I first lived in Louisville. Now I live in Southern Indiana. And my husband and I started Extol we started at the end of 2014 and debuted in 2015. And I recall a few people asking if I was concerned, that I might face something. And I mean, why? Because we're a potential competition for someone. I mean, it never occurred to me that they were talking about the color of my skin until we got deeper into the conversation. And while I know for sure that there is division here, and my walk is my walk, and it's my walk only, I'm appreciative that I have been embraced by the Southern Indiana community, and that I look forward to continuing to engage here. You live in Fenton, my last name, Fenton, Michigan. We grew up, by the way, right next door. And to equate it to, I guess it'd be like going to the University of Louisville and you grew up at the University of Kentucky. Fenton and Holly were rivals in rural Michigan. But Jen, I mean, in Fenton, Michigan, what about for you? I mean, I feel embraced here in Southern Indiana. I know there is much work to be done. And again, my journey is my journey, but what's your experience there?
Well, moving to Fenton was a choice. Absolutely, 100% a choice. And part of it was after having lived many places, I wanted something a little smaller. Obviously, when I started to think about having a family, I wanted to be close to family. So our mom's in maybe 5 miles away, not too far. But I also considered that Flint was only 20 minutes away. And so a lot of people recognize Flint, Michigan from having the water crisis and, the at time mayor deliberately poisoned, thousands of people. But it's also extremely diverse. There is a huge Black population there, but we also have 3 different universities and a whole bunch of satellites. So I wanted to be in a place where I could raise my children with a diverse culture. And actually, Fenton has become, over the 17 years we've lived here, it's become much more diverse. So, again, being snarky and unprofessional, my girlfriends and I kind of laugh and say we're the diversity in Fenton. So one of my good friends is Vietnamese American, and we have a Chilean friend and a couple of Korean friends. So again, being snarky because we can sometimes, but I've watched as Fenton has become a little more diverse, and you get to start to see more culture come in. And that's been pretty awesome. But definitely the goal was to be close to a place where you could go and celebrate, Black History Month, or you could celebrate Diwali, or you could celebrate the Day of the Dead and have people from those cultures leading you through things that you may not necessarily understand. So in my lineage of things that you said I did, I've also been a Bollywood dancer for 5 years. And so learning about not just Bollywood dance, but learning about the Punjab culture from our master teacher has just been amazing. Even hearing the history of how her family came over from the United States and what turmoil even spurned that was just there's so much history to learn. And if you start to look at it from the lens of the people who experienced it and not people just telling you about it, it's a whole other way of realigning yourself and finding what's important to you.
Flint, oh my gosh, and you just brought back memories because again, growing up with a mom who had to work full time, who was our sole financial support in addition to everything else that she did. And we're so lucky that our church, our community picked up what she couldn't because she had to literally provide food on the table for us, But mom made sure to take us to Flint and the Sloan Museum and to do things to enrich who we were as people. Man, mom,
As well as driving to Detroit, seeing the Detroit Institute of
Detroit.
Arts.
I
And
mean, she just made she
I
I love
think she made she was very aware that she could not provide 100% of what we needed just by being our mother. And so she very, very, very much dug in to give us a cultural experience that we could resonate with. So,
good Lord, like you're not supposed to cry before like noon or something. I love our mom. Our mom really set a high bar, and I thank her for all that she put in to helping us be who we are. I will also say that Flint, Michigan is where I got my second tattoo and use words that I won't use here while my three sisters were standing there because I didn't fully want a tattoo. And then I chose one of the worst places to get a tattoo. And I used language that is not appropriate for children and hand gestures that are not, but it's on my foot. And I look at that sister's tattoo every single day. And I think of you, Jen, and I appreciate you taking the time.
Absolutely. And, you know, the funny thing I learned about the tattoo on the day of the tattoo is it was before our sister Stephanie's wedding. And Steph and I had talked about, oh, we're all going to be here. We should get a sister's tattoo. Unbeknownst to me, the other two thought that everybody was all in and they were hesitant. So yes, there were many words thrown at me like, I didn't realize, blah, blah. And I just smile. And as for using adverse language, just going to say here with a doctorate in writing in English, I use words for a living, and that means all the words.
Oh, and I use words for a living, and that means all the words as well. And now I'm working on tattoo number 4. So
4. Oh wow. I have one, just one. That's it.
here's my
Yes, you have olive.
my olive tattoo, and then my 2
I have stretch marks to remind me of my children.
Oh my love. Okay. Well, that's a conversation for another time.
Whole other day.
Dear sister, happy Black History Month, and thank you.
Happy Black History Month to you. I am about to go do some dance fitness and
Of course
do
you
some
are.
stuff.
Thanks for joining us, and we hope you'll continue to celebrate Black History Month with us. Brought to you by MAC Construction and Samtec Cares.